The seeds of faith are often unseen. A cross, a rosary, a chapter, a verse, perhaps a gathering, a chapel. These small seeds grow in strength and numbers. In the 1500s, when the Spaniards first came to the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, these seeds were being slowly planted, perhaps unseen but growing. In 1965, the seeds blossomed into the newly formed Catholic Diocese of Brownsville. Today, this fast-growing diocese is home to ministries and movements reaching out to millions. Join me to explore the history, the beauty, the vitality of the Catholic Diocese of Brownsville as they celebrate 50 faithful years.
The diocese, this area of the Rio Grande Valley, has a long history going back all the way to the first Franciscan missionaries who struggled to establish outposts of the faith here along the Rio Grande River. It was later when the Oblates came in the 1840s and the 1850s that more permanent settlements of faith were established, like here in Brownsville at Immaculate Conception, which is one of the earliest settlements of the church as was established by the Oblate missionaries. This was shortly after Texas became part of the United States, after the war with Mexico and the various historical events that basically established this area as a sort of an independent sort of locality. It was in the 1870s when this area was created as a vicariate. That is, the Holy Father, Pope Pius IX in those days, 1874, took the whole of South Texas from Brownsville up to Corpus Christi, up to Laredo, and created it as the Vicariate of Brownsville, so that the life of the church could be organized with the assistance of an appointed bishop. And the Immaculate Conception Cathedral became a cathedral at that time because there was a sitting bishop here at that moment. As the church continued to grow in the whole of South Texas, eventually this area was created a diocese. It was created a diocese in 1912, and it was the Diocese of Corpus Christi, because by that time the city of Corpus Christi had become larger, and that's where the bishop's seat was. But it still included the same territory that had been the Vicariate of Brownsville. Subsequently, after the further development of the church, again, this whole area from Corpus Christi to Brownsville up to Laredo on the west side, as it continued to grow, the Diocese of Corpus Christi at that time was split in two, such that the Diocese of Brownsville was created in 1965, basically encompassing the 4 counties that we have today. And that's one of the principal things we're celebrating. It was in July of 1965 that Pope Paul VI made this the Diocese of Brownsville in its modern manifestation. It had been the Vicariate of Brownsville in the 1870s, and now it became a diocese in its own right, but a smaller territory, basically the counties of Cameron and Willacy and Hidalgo and Starr. And that was when the first bishop, Bishop Marks, was appointed to take over the diocese, is when we celebrate the establishment of this territory as the Diocese of Brownsville. And so we're celebrating 50 years of that modern manifestation of the life of the church here in the Diocese of Brownsville. As the church continues to grow, it's a very dynamic and flourishing area of the faith, and there continue to be many, many challenges that face us all.
Jesus calls the faithful to be bold like the early apostles, not afraid to live out of the faith with fervor and joy. This dynamic love can be seen in the lives of faithful in the Diocese of Brownsville. This bold witness comes from the ever-flowing love of Jesus. God never tires, so each day is a chance to live with a renewed fervor and love for our fellow man.
In this ever-changing world, where sin is welcomed with open arms and faith is often kicked out to the curb, we find in this diocese an awakened heart and spirit. As they celebrate their 50th anniversary, the Diocese of Brownsville is a living example of the new springtime in the church, of which St. John Paul II spoke about.
Like the mustard seed, great faith often has simple beginnings with a promising future.
Well, I think we have been faithful. I think, we began as a very small diocese. There were only 11 diocesan priests when the diocese was started, and maybe about 40 or so oblates of Mary Immaculate. Since that time, there were many more parishes, we have many more priests, and the population has grown tremendously. When I served here as a priest, there were miles between the different towns. Now you go from town to town, and the city limits divides one town from the other. Whereas back then, there were maybe 3 or 4 miles between one town and the next. So the growth is very, very evident. And as the growth has gone, physically speaking, materially speaking, I think the life of the church has grown as well.
Throughout history, the Church has led humanity to the truth of the gospel message. This South Texas diocese has followed her example by proclaiming God's truth daily. Leadership by religious and lay here have been a light shining the way to a renewed sense of life along the Mexican border.
The diocese provides the spiritual leadership for all of the Rio Grande Valley. That's a very important role. And I have seen a great progress throughout this 50 years. Progress like I've never seen so many more deacons that have come into place, many programs for the youth, for young adults. They have really led our area in leadership to increase the spirituality of all of us Catholics here. And I want to add that here in McAllen, 71% of all the people that attend religious organizations and faith communities here in McAllen just happen to be Catholic.
Faith grows among those who build upon the rock of the Church. Like St. Peter, we must step out and walk upon the stormy water without fear and doubt. The early church pioneers of Rio Grande Valley set aside these fears and boldly planted seeds for future generations of Texans.
Church was built in 1859, and it wasn't built as a cathedral. It was built as a big church so that the Mexican people could come and have Mass. And it became the cathedral in 1965, and that made it all the more special.
Seeds planted in fertile soil often grow into mighty trees. The Oblates of Mary Immaculate pioneers planted seeds of faith that are still evident today. They handed down the faith to young Texans, who in turn passed it to future generations. Today we can witness the fruits of their great dedication and trust in the Lord.
Faith goes back a long way, and we can attribute the bringing of the faith largely to the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. This order was instrumental in establishing the faith and helping the faith grow in our area. So that goes back to the 19th century when they rode on horseback along the Rio Grande to the various ranch chapels, and from Brownsville all the way to Roma. So they were instrumental in our area of bringing and establishing the faith. And of course, in the last 100 years, we have witnessed a huge increase in population in these lower 4 counties of Texas. And this increase in population has been a blessing, but also a challenge of continuing to evangelize and bringing the good news of salvation to the population here in South Texas. But those roots go back largely to the Oblates of Mary Immaculate. We have them to thank, and the numerous orders also of sisters that were missionaries here, teaching in the schools in our area, that helped bring the faith to young people.
Strong, prayerful families are an important element for creating a loving society. The Diocese of Brownsville fosters this by giving faithful Catholics access to the Church's sacraments and providing guidance to the living lives in the truth of the gospel. The home is where the young people of the church experience, for the first time, the eternal love of the Trinity. Holy families are the birthplace of future priests, religious, and lay Catholic leadership.
The reality is a big part of the work of the Family Life Office concentrates on marriage preparation, because that's one major way that parishes often need the assistance of our diocesan offices, both to provide marriage preparation retreats, and we coordinate 22 marriage preparation retreats a year, 5 different types, and we also provide training for marriage sponsor couples throughout the diocese. One of the guidelines for the Diocese of Brownsville is that engaged couples wanting to marry in the church, one of their requirements is to both assist a marriage preparation retreat that'll be helpful to their specific situation, as well as to attend 4 to 10 sessions with a marriage sponsor couple in their particular parish. So that's one of the great things about the office, is that we're able to offer different types of retreats. We have Catholic Engaged Encounter. That's a retreat for couples never married, never lived together, no children. It's a full retreat from a Friday evening to a Sunday afternoon. They stay over a couple nights here at the retreat center. We also have a retreat that's called Retiro Prematrimonial. It's also for couples never married, never lived together, no children, but in Spanish, and it's not an overnight retreat.
Growing population, it's something that we're constantly looking to cultivate and to make stronger. This sense of the relationship between family life and the presence of God in our lives through the church and to the grace of the sacraments. That's one of the great characteristics of life here in the Valley, is that the faith is a part of daily life, and it shows itself in attendance at Mass and in prayer at home and in the different ways by which we try to evangelize and help people come in contact with the mystery of God's grace in their everyday life.
The Scriptures tell us to care for the stranger and foreign-born as if they were our own. The Diocese of Brownsville has welcomed many who have traveled across the Mexican border in order to enter the United States. Catholic Charities, founded over 100 years ago to show solidarity among those servicing the needy, has been an integral part in showing this love of God in the Rio Grande Valley by providing help to those needing shelter, food, and immigration services.
A lot of the parishes are assisting Sacred Heart in McAllen. That seemed to be kind of ground zero for a lot of the refugees that have been coming across the border, which started last summer. And so through Catholic Charities, we have been doing all we can to assist with alleviating some of the suffering that these people are experiencing by not only food and clothing, but other articles that they need.
Jesus wants us to love our neighbor, including the stranger amongst us. Living this gospel message shows the world the saving power of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Sacred Heart Parish in McAllen, Texas, in a partnership with the Catholic Charities, has become the arms of Christ by coming to the aid of new immigrants at the parish's Immigrant Center, just 5 miles north of the border. New immigrants are always greeted here with a round of applause to show that they are welcomed.
The facility here is provided by Sacred Heart Church, which is part of the Diocese of Brownsville. They graciously given up their building pretty much for this past year so that we can house the center here and have these families come through here to receive the change of clothing and showers and meals and things like that.
One of the things that we do see on a regular basis is people from the community that are struggling and they find themselves difficult to meet the needs in their everyday living, whether it is to pay their bills to make sure they do not become homeless, whether it is to pay their bills to go to the doctor, or even if there's a hurricane or a disaster, or something like what we just experienced last year here in our community in McAllen in the Valley, was the great immigration of folks that come from the South. And so we find ourselves responding and taking the lead in making sure that we address and help the families that are arriving here in our community.
There's a great poverty here in the Rio Grande Valley. and Catholic Charities extends many services to help housing situations when we face disasters and things like that, but also food assistance. But also the local parishes do this through their St. Vincent de Paul societies, or the local charitable works that go on through the many sort of organizations that we have, like the Knights of Columbus and other groups that continue to kind of keep a very vigilant eye on how it is that we can be of assistance to those who are suffering. Especially, we are very concerned about our young children and their need for support and their need for encouragement in staying close to God and staying close to what is good in life.
The diocese has been working very diligently in a very professional level with the government, particularly with the Border Patrol here, but with the government in many different programs. Presently, we have a wonderful program here in McAllen, with Sacred Heart Church. We process, I understand, between 80 to 100 children a day in an immigrant status.
Good partnerships are essential in creating a community that looks to serve others. Working together gives us hope for a brighter future.
Here recently, it's been in the news of all of this immigrants coming in from Mexico, Central America, and South America to the United States. And this has been the corridor. So Catholic Charities here in McAllen set up our Sacred Heart Church Parish as pretty much kind of the go-to area, and along with Catholic Charities, the city of McAllen put in a lot of resources and money to be able to provide service to this very needy immigrants.
The diocese has been a welcoming home to many immigrants from the lands that lie across the border. Families are included amongst the newcomers. Helping the families is essential to fostering a sense of the love of Jesus. The love knows no borders and always has open arms.
Well, in regard to immigration, one of the major initiatives that I have taken was to establish the Office for Immigration Services, by which the diocese assists families to prepare their immigration papers and to become citizens or residents, all of that whole process. That office, for a very nominal fee, assists many families. When they go to lawyers, of course, they have to pay professional fees, and that becomes difficult for many of them. So having this office under the auspices of the diocese facilitates for the poor the necessary work to receive their citizenship.
Our Lady of San Juan del Valle is very important for us here in the Diocese of Brownsville, because she, in many ways, she represents the immigrant. Of course, our whole country is a country based on immigration. Peoples have come historically from many places, but right now, with this huge influx of people coming from Central America into the United States, they're coming through us here. So I think it's fitting that we continue to honor Mary as Our Lady of San Juan del Valle, as she continues to draw us closer to her Son.
Small but faithful parishes have been a pillar of the spiritual strength. Great parishes are built from the small acts of love.
This diocese logistically is quite packed. As you can see, it's one little town after another. And so there's a cohesiveness, I believe. I think it lends itself to the kind of ministry all our different departments do, because we are so close in proximity, and being that it is largely Catholic in population, not, certainly not 100%. There's a lot of diversity in the area, but still, 85% or so, 80 to 85% are Catholic. So I think it's a very unique diocese, and I think it's a kind of a gem in the larger sense of the word, of having a lot of Catholic faithful learning together, growing together, and ministering to others in many ways.
Way to go, Miguel! This is La Lomita Chapel, which would be the mother church of the Guadalupe Church
but it's also symbolic of a lot of the oblate missions up and down the river. The towns were not big towns, they were little ranchos, and they would have a chapel, and they would have the ranch and the people that lived around the community, their little pueblo. And so the oblates started coming to this ranch probably in the 1850s, and they would stay here, but it wasn't like a main mission. The two main missions were Roma and Brownsville, so this was like a way station. So if they would stay here, it would just be for some time, days, and then they'd move on.
It shares a common border with the country of Mexico by the Rio Grande River. It certainly has a tremendous formative influence on the life here in the Rio Grande Valley. Many of our families here in the southern part of Texas have relations and have family connections on the Mexican side of the border, and so it creates kind of a unique situation in the whole of the United States, and it continues to be a dynamic part of the expression of faith. This close familial sort of relationship that we have with the church in Mexico.
Faith can be most strengthened when it has been most tested. The Diocese of Brownsville faces daily challenges, but she shows her faith in the actions of many Catholics who call this part of the world home.
That one of the great challenges facing us here in the Rio Grande Valley in the church is just the tremendous growth of the population. We're estimating well over 1 million Catholics here in the Diocese of Brownsville. Some would say 1,200,000. And so one of my great priorities is to establish new mission churches, but also parishes, and to kind of help with the resources that a community needs to kind of be able to provide the community life that is necessary for the life of the church that is growing so fast here in the Rio Grande Valley.
Christ calls us to love the least of these. God's love is seen when humans choose to love their neighbors. This is a good example of how Christ loved his church. This type of love is a gift from God and is the best tool to ward off sin. Nothing is impossible when faithful Catholics have God's grace upon their hearts.
All our parishes are truly living witness today. Faith is active, faith is alive, the church is very much alive, not only among the elder one, but very much among our youth. I have seen a tremendous growth. We are very happy to have the Institute, Juan Diego Institute, that leads our lay people to prepare themselves better. We have many for lay people who are seeking theological studies of spiritual direction. It's a tremendous asset and richness for the church to continue to grow in the valley.
We have to take time to reflect on. It's an opportunity also for us as church to reflect on where we've been and where we're going. And so to just to be able to help not only the adults but the children to come to know and understand and appreciate the history that's unique to this area of the world.
We have been seeing a steady sort of increase of young men entering the seminary, but also young women who show interest in participating and in joining religious communities. I think part of that is faith in the family. I think that's one of the most important aspects of it, that faith continues to be an integral part of the life of a family, and that influences children to even contemplate the possibility of serving the church in this way. So there's a strong sense of the need for God in people's lives.
Jesus calls us to have a childlike faith. Never be afraid to live in the eternal presence of God's love. Never let fear get in the way of staying on the path that leads to the gates of heaven and eternal life with the angels and saints.
The next 50 years, only God knows for sure, but we have to be prepared for continued growth, for a continued vitality, but also for continued assistance and need to be of service to those who come to us who are either suffering from poverty or lack of education or seeking a better way of life. This is kind of a place where worlds meet. The world of Latin America and the world of the United States sort of meet in this area. So we need to be prepared for this kind of multicultural, very, very diverse, yet very deeply rooted in a tradition as something that will kind of help us to kind of orient ourselves into the future.
Great joy will always be a part of a faithful people.
I foresee more the churches to be more filled with people and our youth being more involved in the church.
Our hope is that we will continue to find new ways to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to the people of our area.
A tested faith brings steadfastness. The Diocese of Brownsville has faced numerous challenges and obstacles, but continues to grow to meet the needs of a chaotic world. Love for the stranger, hungry, naked, imprisoned, and lonely are the fruits of this faith. The future lies in the hearts of the faithful.
Theirs is a story of the journey of faith, of tragedy, of sufferings, but ultimately of hope and renewal. The people of the Diocese of Brownsville truly live out their faith, and we are invited to do the same. God bless you.
Teach everything He commanded them to teach.
New ways to communicate God's Word.
Present positive images to our people.
This message of truth and salvation.
Culture of encounter.
Gospel of Christ worldwide.
Shalom World TV.
(24/7)
Faith-filled,
dynamic,
virtue-building,
commercial-free,
family-friendly,
Catholic charismatic channel to the whole world.
Promote the gift of church teaching.
Dedicated for the new evangelization.
Mentor the young into a deeper embrace of the Catholic faith.
Wonderful contributions to the church.
People of prayer.
Attractive people, attractive messages.
Peace of Christ.
Promote the values of life.
This is media at its very best.
The voice of the church.
With great love.
Taking this to the next step.
Shalom World TV.
Shalom, shalom.
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 Shalom. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom. Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom World, God's own channel.